Okay, well, I think we'll get started. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending upon where you are joining us from. We are so happy to have you with us today. I want to let everyone know that this event is being recorded and ask that you please make sure that you're muted. So, my name's Emily Loeb, and I'm the director of the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. And for those of us who are new to our organization, we teach about the Holocaust and anti-Semitism with the goal of building a more civil and humane society. And we run a host of programs to accomplish this. We facilitate and organize school-based and community-facing educational programs and trainings, exhibits, lectures, and events, and educational opportunities that cultivate a deeper understanding of the topics of the Holocaust and anti-Semitism. Today, you're joining us for one of our daytime virtual learning series programs, where we're able to share the work and stories of people no matter where they're located in the world. If you're local to Pittsburgh, please note that we have a couple of in-person public programs lined up throughout the summer. One I'd like to highlight is our public program centered on the program we've been running with Christian Associates of Southwest PA for the last year. It's called Reckoning with Anti-Semitism as Christians, and the program will be at 7 p.m. on Wednesday, June 24th at Beit Kulanu, which is the former Road of Shalom. And you'll hear from Christians who've been reckoning with anti-Semitism and from Jews who have taken part in their efforts. And we'll also be sharing for the first time a published book of sermons written by local Christian clergy who've engaged their congregations and communities in conversations about anti-Semitism from the pulpit and beyond. And we'll provide a link to our events page in the chat so you can learn more about some of our upcoming programs. Today, we're excited to host Elizabeth and Alexandra Bellak. Elizabeth is a Holocaust survivor from southeastern Poland. She grew up as an actor and performer and was known as the Polish Shirley Temple. She had an older sister named Renia who did not survive the war. Elizabeth and her mother found refuge in and then built their lives in America. Decades after the war ended, Elizabeth's daughter, Alexandra, learned about her Aunt Renia's diary, which had been kept in a safety deposit box for years. Renia's diary was a record of her daily life as the Nazis spread throughout Europe. She wrote of her mundane school life, drama with friends, falling in love with her boyfriend, and the agony of missing her mother. Renia had aspirations to be a writer, and the diary is filled with her poignant and thoughtful poetry. Alexandra had it translated and published, and it became an international bestseller. The book, Renia's Diary, is available to purchase, and we have provided a link to do so in the chat. For our program today, I'll be asking them a series of questions to allow them to speak about Elizabeth and Renia's lives in Poland, the discovery and publishing of the diary, and the impact it has had on their lives. That will take approximately 45 minutes. And if you have questions during the talk, please feel free to submit them in the chat, and we're then going to consolidate them for a Q&A following the interview. So with that, we will begin. Elizabeth, I would love to start with you. Can you tell us
Sure.
a little bit about your life, where you were born and when you were born, and a little bit about your parents and what happened to your family during the Holocaust?
That's a big question.
Right. It is.
Well, I was born Ariana Spiegel, the Polish Shirley Temple. I changed my name during the war. I was baptized at 11, and my name became Elizabeth Yaroslava Leszczyńska on false papers. Now, I was born on my father's estate by the border of Romania. There was nothing around our house. It was just the birds singing. My sister loved. She liked the moving of the tree. She was so romantic. She saw everything good in everything. And she was just wonderful. She was 6 years older than I. My father had a lot of Ukrainians who worked for him. We didn't hear too much about anti-Semitism there because my father was very good to them. He paid them well. They loved him. So my life was pretty good. I had a nanny who later left to France. My sister was not born in Stufki. I was born in Stufki. And when I was going to be born, they made a big stork out of the paper, put it in the window, and said, "Baby is coming." So here I was, arriving at that time. And we had a pretty good life. We had a cook. Her name was Hanya. Went to city with horses. We never had any cars. We had no phone. It was different life 100 years ago. I'm only 95, so it's almost 100 years. And I can't believe it. I'm still around. My mind is still going. So I'm happy about that. And my sister had to go to school. Now, there was no school in the fields of my father. My grandpa Henrik, with his wife, they lived in the back of the house. They have their own part of the house. We lived in the front of the house. And my father used to raise a lot of sugar beets. So they used to send it to the factories. Actually, they used to come and negotiate, I don't know, about the bread and money, I don't know. And we also had fields with wheat and a lot. But the main part was the sugar beets, which she used to sell to the factory to make sugar. So my life was pretty nice. We used to go to Zaleszczyki, and in Zaleszczyki there was a river Dniest. Zaleszczyki was like what should I say? People used to come there for enjoyment, and that was by the river. It was nice, and my mom used to go there to buy sugar, to buy, because we had everything else that grew in the house, and our refrigerator was in the ground. There was no refrigerator in our house. So life was really quite different what it is today, with putting buttons and everything ready. And so you had to put the fire in order to get warm. We had these big stoves made out of ceramics. And, used to take the time. But the woman used to come. We had a woman who did that. And life was very nice. It was very cold in the wintertime, and it was very not so hot in the summer. It was like a landland life. It was very nice. So my father had two brothers also on the land and three sisters. One sister married a Christian and lived in Warsaw, Ciocia Helena, and the other sister, Mania, lived not far. She married a Königsberg, had a son, Lilo, and Munek had also a boy, and Marek had two boys. So they all lived on land. Everybody was like a landowner. Or they permitted some of the Polish Jews, to own land in that part of Poland. So our life was quite nice. Now, my sister was always writing something. When she was already 14, she was writing poems. So my mother thought she was very talented in that field. And I used to recite some of their poems, even though I was younger. So I thought, my mother thought, that's something interesting. So now, about last month, a man that works in the archives, he sent me a picture. I'm going to show it to you. It's a picture of me, and it says, can you see that?
Yeah.
Cudowne dziecko, it says. It's a wonderful child. I was 7. And you know the town of Lviv, called Lviv now, used to be called Lvov. And they had a radio station. That's where this paper comes from. Because I was on the radio there, so was my sister. And she wrote such a beautiful poem. They just sent it to me. It was about an orphan child. I almost cried. How a little orphan girl goes around and she has tattered clothes, completely shattered, and she has nothing. And they say, "What is the matter?" And she says, "I'm hungry and I have nowhere to go and nothing to eat." That was my sister's poem. But she was always, some ways she was positive, in some way she was always for the downtrodden life. And she was young, but she was so romantic. My goodness, she loved everything. She said, "You hear how the wind is blowing and the leaves are moving and how the birds are singing." She saw all these beautiful things in the country. So she loved our life.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, it wasn't so long. And
right.
she had to go to school. She used to go to Przemysl, where is now the border between Ukraine and Poland. And that's where she went to school with my grandparents. We had no school where we lived, it was fields.
Yeah, Alexandra, and thank you, Elizabeth. Alexandra, can you talk a little bit about your aunt's diary and how it came to your family and some of the things people will learn about when they read the book?
Well, first, I wanted to thank the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh for organizing this important talk, inviting us, and to you, Emily, and your team for inviting us and moderating. I know that the Holocaust Center's mission of advocating for Holocaust survivors and your dedication to preserving the legacies and lessons of the Holocaust are needed now more than ever. And what I want to say is, you know, these are difficult times that we're in. And I feel like it's painful to talk about the state of world Jewry today. Painful, but necessary. And I know that, especially those listening in Pittsburgh, you are all too familiar with the scourge of violence against Jews. So it's important for us to have these talks and dialogues to discuss our feelings and what we can do to address these things, because I know that silence is not the answer, but that's maybe part of the problem. But in terms of the diary, so my name is Alexandra Renata, and I was always interested in this person I was named after that I was never able to meet. Unfortunately, my mother never talked about her wartime period, which I think is not unusual for Holocaust survivors. It was just too traumatizing, and she wanted to move on with her life here. So I was curious and curious about my past, curious about this woman I was named after. And I wanted to delve more into the story. And the story started with a simple question I started asking in my teens: who was this mysterious woman that I was never able to meet? And the mysterious woman in question is my Aunt Renia, who was brutally killed by the Nazis just a few days after her 18th birthday. Other than that, all I knew was that she had a 600 plus page diary that she hand wrote that somehow made its way to America, somehow made its way to my mother, and then lay dormant in a bank vault for 70 odd years. Now, I knew that my mother was the Polish Shirley Temple because we have the articles and clippings. What I didn't know until the book was published in 2019, first in English, then 23 other countries, is that my aunt would be called the Polish Anne Frank. And the diary, after reading it, it brought me closer to my aunt. I learned about her love of poetry, which she has a completely separate book. She wrote over 60 poems. I read about her love of poetry, philosophy, music. I also read about her crushes on boys and her passion for life. And it was reading these passages, especially her hopes and dreams for the future, that truly made me weep, and felt a need to bring this to a larger audience.
Elizabeth, what was it like for you to read Renya's diaries so many years later?
Well, I never read the diary. You know, my mother put it in a vault. That was that. She never read it. And miraculously, she got it. Was Zygmunt from the book, when you read the book, he was in 5 different camps. I don't know, it's so stupid. When he finally found my mom in New York and we lived in this little apartment, and we had 1 bedroom in the West Side. And he came, my mother was so shocked. He found her in New York, now he was already a doctor. They went to Heidelberg because the Germans sent them to Heidelberg to go to medical school if they wanted to. His father was a doctor. So he takes my mother, his father, and my sister out of the ghetto. The next day, they get shot because the brother of his mom, he's the head of the Judenrat outside, puts them on the roof, the garret, and they die. So he comes the next day, they're all gone. And me, he takes out and gives it to the Polish. I go to my Polish girlfriend, and the father saves my life taking to my mom. So, it was something unbelievable how it all happened. And my poor sister had to die. I mean, why? Because she was Jewish. She was older than I. Now remember, we stayed with my grandparents during the Soviet occupation. So my mom didn't see us. She only came once na Zasania, which is the river in Przemysl has a river. It's called Sun. On the Nazasanya, it's on the other side of the sun. So she came one day somewhere, and we somehow got Przepustki. Przepustka is something you get a permission to go through the bridge. So on one side is a Russian soldier standing with a gun. On the other side is a German standing with a gun. But if you have this paper, so that's how we saw our mother first time. And then we never saw her again. So my sister only saw her once.
So I know that, the diary really outlines and explains Renia's experience in daily life during the war. What do you remember about your daily life?
Oh, well, I was doing this. So, well, first, first I was a Shirley Temples. So my mother, before the war, she took me to Warsaw. I was in the movies. So in the book, there's a little strip, and she had it. That's why we found out that I was in the movie. And from that man who made the movie, they made a movie about him. His name was Michał Waszyński. He really was Jewish, had a Jewish name, but he was gay in the 30s and a Jew. So he changed everything. He became Michał Waszyński. He made 42 movies, and I was in one of his movies. It's called Gehenna. We found that out from the strip. And in Gehenna, I'm a little gypsy girl. So they found a piece of strip that I was in the movies. And then I was only what? What was I? 8, I think 8, 9. But I used to dance a little bit, sing a little bit. I used to play the piano too. I had a lot of talent, I guess. So I recited poetry of two the best poems in Poland. Actually, they were both Jews. One was Julian Tuwim, and one was Jan Brzechwa. They were terrific. I think they got christened. I'm not sure how that thing went.
She should recite one of them because they're so wonderful that even if you don't speak Polish,
Well, I don't know which one.
You want to recite one? That would be wonderful.
Wieprza ta dyszynka będzie lepsza. Właśnie po to wieprza pieprze, żeby mięso było lepsze.
It's like Peter Piper picked a peck of, but in Polish.
Oh, the Tuwim's poem was najpierw powoli, jak żółw odwiązane, suszyła maszyna w porszynę. This is a train going.
It's like the movement of a locomotive. So you can
You know,
feel
it
it.
was such wonderful, and I used to recite it as a kid. So I was in, they invited us both to their houses. I went to Tuvim's house, I went to Brzechwa's house. So this was before the war.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 1939, my mom sends me to the sister so I could be with her, with my grandparents. And that's when the Soviets occupied that part by the River Sun. And the Germans are there. My mother's in Warsaw. She stays there. But I wanted to tell you about that movie they made. So they came and made the movie about Michał Waszyński. And they showed it, they won what?
The Golden Lion. They made a documentary about this director.
And I'm in the movie, so he introduced me here.
She's
in
the
Lincoln
only
Center.
person still alive from his movies.
Wow.
I can send you the clip. It's very cute.
That would be wonderful. And we can send it out to the registrants. That'd be really great.
So he was terrific. And they came, they interviewed me. And so then they showed it here in Lincoln Center. And they clapped for me, introduced me. It was funny. I don't know, after all those years, I was the only one alive. So, that was fun. But then, going to Soviet school wasn't so bad. They let the Jews go to school. But, of course, that was okay. I mean, they took some. We used to see, because we had a balcony. We lived on one of the main streets, in my grandpa's house. And so across the street, we saw at night how they grabbed the people to take them to the gulags. At night, they would come and take the people. We could see that. Our time wasn't yet, but you never knew. You never knew what. But we went to school when the Germans came, of course. It was all different. You had to wear the armband. I didn't have to. I wasn't old enough. I mean, you were 12, you had to wear. So I didn't wear the armband. But my sister, of course, she did. And it was, you couldn't go in the street after 8. And it was really dangerous. Soviet, we lived, you know what I mean? But when the Germans came, it all changed. They started right away to make the ghetto. And, when you had, my grandpa paid off. So the guy comes to the door. He used to know the policeman. He's a Polish guy. And he said, Panie tego tamto. And he gave him whatever. And we stayed a year in our building. It was an apothecary, 2 stores, and we lived in the building. And so we stayed there, and then we went to the ghetto. And then Zygmunt takes her out, and they killed them. And he takes me out to Leszczyński. And Leszczyński takes me to my mom. And you know how dangerous that was? So everybody actually knew me in town. They didn't see me somehow. We go to the railroad station. I saw it now after 80 years. They showed Przemysl because I first saw the railroad station in Przemysl.
Wow.
So he took me to my mom, but we had to change in Krakow, dogs, everything. And I have just this little lunchbox with me. So Grandpa, last time I saw him, he said, you see, Yarusha, you have to I put some gold coins all in this little box, and I taped it in, and then thing, there is gold, other things and stuff you can sell if you have no money. So all I was a little dress, a little coat, a little lunchbox. And I was with Mr. Leszczyński. And the dogs and the Gestapo, and he held my hand and said, this is my daughter.
Do you still have the lunchbox?
No more. I don't know what happened to it. It was a little thing.
But miraculously, she has a lot of photographs She has costumes that they wore during these harvest events.
My mother had it. That's why we have
She
it.
has some things
Yeah.
from the past.
So, Alexandra, I know you said that your mom didn't speak a lot about the Holocaust before you started translating the book, but how much did you know about your family roots and your mom's story of survival before you embarked on publishing your aunt's diary?
You know, not much. And, you know, I'm thankful that she's here because she was reluctant to tell her story and unearth painful memories, which were simply too traumatizing to tell. And I think we're all lucky to have her here because there's so few survivors left. I think it's like 190,000, maybe. You would know better than me, and even fewer that have the energy and capacity to do these things. And, you know, while it's difficult, I think, for her to tell this story, it's difficult to listen to, it's difficult to believe it, it has new value. And while she didn't discuss her past with me or the family, I think she just set it aside so she could somehow forge a life for herself here. And she also wanted to recognize her sister, a sister who was often like a mother figure to her when she didn't have her mother around for those 2 years that they were separated. So I didn't know much. And my father was also a survivor, but he was from Vienna. He came in 1939. And I just have to encourage people to ask their parents, grandparents, great grandparents questions, because when they're no longer here, we can no longer get those answers.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot when we're visiting classrooms of encouraging kids to ask your families about how.
We never asked Zygmunt when he came, where did you
Where
stay
did
in
he
the
keep the
diary?
diary all those years? He was in all these concentration
He was in
camps.
five
He had to have
camps.
left it with some.
Yeah. How has the publication of such a personal and private thing been received within your family?
So, you know, Renia was writing for an audience of one. She was writing to and for herself. So sometimes I feel like I've trespassed on her most intimate dialogue because a lot of it is about the stirrings of a woman in love. But I have embraced her wholeheartedly. The rest of the family, well, it's interesting because, and my mother will tell you, the only other relative that survived lived in France.
Uncle Maurice.
And so while her mother studied in Vienna, her uncle studied in France. So when the war breaks out, he's in France. He does get incarcerated, survives, marries a woman from French society, and lives the rest of his life without saying anything about his past. The French family was not so embracing because they grew up Catholic, very Catholic. They all went to Catholic schools. And while they always questioned because his last name was Finkel, so obviously, you know, something was going on with his past, but they never learned about it because he just wouldn't talk about it. He was silent. So I don't know how receptive they were. Yeah.
He told me, don't, Yarka, forget. Yeah. But he was nice to us. He said that he wanted us to go to France. So when we survived because my mom went to University of Vienna. Her German was impeccable. So she worked in a Hotel Europejski, 5-star hotel, and the people who lived there were German officers. So we lived with the German officers, where the guys outside and inside. It was the best street in Warsaw, and she did everything in German. There was an assistant to the director. His name was Mr. Kurz, which German means short, right? Kurz. He was a Volksdeutsch. That meant he was German descent. But he couldn't speak German. He couldn't do anything. My mother was educated at the university. She spoke perfect German. So she was an assistant. She did everything. She was baptized in 1940. And the priest who baptized her, she did everything for his church for free. And he was very nice also. But when he baptized her, it was in the books. But later on, when he did me, he couldn't put it in the books because the Germans used to come and look at the books. If somebody was baptized, that means there was still a Jew. So they didn't put us in the book.
Wow.
But he put me in the convent first, and oh my God, I went everywhere. We went through so much hell there, you have no idea. We used to live somewhere first, and we would go and would be Wapanka one Sunday. And then there was a trolley car, and it said Nur für Deutsche. It was a chain. So in front were the Germans. They needed 100,000 people to work in Germany. So they were going to take people from the street, put them on these trucks, and go to Germany to work. So when they told us to get out, my mom took my hand and said in German, start talking to me German. The guy is standing with a machine gun, but he figures, in the Deutsche, she's German, and forget it. So he doesn't shoot us. But imagine how I felt. That's how I became to live in that hotel. All day long, we were walking, all day, because it was Wapanka all over Warsaw. Till we got to the hotel at 6, we were supposed to go there for lunch to the director. So the guy said, you go nowhere anymore. You're going to live right here. That's why we lived in the hotel with the Germans.
So, what do you hope readers, especially young people, will take from Renia's story and legacy?
Well, first of all, they have to see she was so intelligent. When we went in Warsaw, we had a meeting in that museum. Pauline, that museum.
Mhm.
A lady came who was a director of some literary something, and she said my sister's book and writing was so beautiful. So, if you study and if you are, accepting, you should study because education is the most important thing. And the young people should be more tolerant. You have to be tolerant to people. We go to church, we go to synagogue, we go to mosque, we pray to God, and yet they fight over the God and hate each other, which is terrible. The young people have to learn how to be tolerant for everybody. That we shouldn't be fighting all the time and kill each other. It's terrible. And look what's happened here. I mean, when we came here and they sang God Bless America, my mother cried because we thought, my God, we finally can speak, we finally can walk, we can talk. And what happened now?
Yeah. What,
That's why I'm talking.
what parts of her diary affected each of you most deeply? I mean, I imagine it was not an easy thing to engage with, Elizabeth, and Alexandra. You were sort of learning about your aunt by reading this.
Ultimately, it's a love story to her boyfriend and a love story to her mother. And I think what's so heart-wrenching is I think in almost every entry, she says, God and mother will save me. And we know how this story ends. And it's almost like the murderous machine of Hitler's vision and the barbarity brought upon Renia's people couldn't silence her voice. She had this human need to write and relate. And she does emerge as this disciplined student and so poetic and so beautifully talented a writer. In fact, historians and scholars, their reaction was that she was a promising literary talent. Mm-hmm. So there's so much of the book that is so rich in history, but it's really ultimately a love story. They talk about on the fringes, the confiscation of things in the home and the wearing of armbands and soldiers in the street and being sent to the gulags. But that's on the fringes. It's really this love story.
I'm so surprised how he kept it. I never been, he came upstairs. I said, my God, Zig. You know, I used to come to the house, sit with my sister by the stove. You know, he was so good looking guy. He had curly dark hair, green eyes, such a gorgeous human being. And my sister cuddled up there. And, you know, I saw him. It was like something, you know, miracle for me. And then, you know, my sister. And she was so good to me during the war. You know, I was young and my mom wasn't there. I don't know, my father, I think we went to visit him once. I don't remember. She writes it in the book. You know, I didn't even know that my mother wanted to get a divorce until I read the book. You know, first I read it in Polish and then I read it in English, but I never read it before. I had a Polish friend, a doctor, and he and we used to go, I was witness and my husband to his wedding. And we used to go away on vacation, and he tried to translate me this diary. I would take it with me because he wrote a book about the Polish uprising. And I just couldn't go a few pages. I'd start crying. I couldn't, you know, it was my sister and this and that. It was my daughter who took the book out of the vault. My mother never read it. And when I used to ask my sister, what are you writing, Renia? She would say, oh, I have so much homework. So we never knew. I never knew she wrote a diary.
Well, one of the questions I had when I was reading it was actually about the translation. The poems, when people get the books, what they'll realize is that throughout her diary, she will just sort of break out into these beautiful poems that are observing nature or what's going on in society or her love of Zygmunt. But how do they do the translation so that and this is like my ignorance of translation, so that it rhymes still from the original Polish, but then it completely works with the English in terms of the tempo and the pacing of the translation?
You know,
A
it's
little
so
bit about that.
translate poetry. It's very difficult to translate poetry. And somehow we got these two ladies in London.
They deserve an award. I mean, I don't speak Polish, but my mother says the essence of the poetry does come through.
It can't be the same.
It's not the same.
It
I don't know
can't.
how they were able to make it rhyme, but somehow they have just this wonderful skill.
In Hebrew, they couldn't translate
right. So the
it
book
because
just came out in Hebrew. There were some holdups along the way, COVID and the war, but they even said they had difficulty translating the poetry from the Polish to Hebrew.
we just got it
So we
yesterday.
just got it, yeah.
But
Oh,
the
you just
thing
got
is,
it yesterday in Hebrew?
yeah, we got it.
It came out in January, but then the whole war came and they weren't able to send it to us until now.
But you know, the thing is, they have no pictures in that. I wonder, is that religious thing?
I don't know
why they don't.
They don't have any pictures. Only my sister on the top and inside.
How many languages has the book been translated into?
23 countries.
Wow.
Some of it we didn't even know what it was, that Finnish and Estonian
translated in
and
Finnish.
Lithuanian.
So they send us a book, but we didn't know what language it was.
It's crazy. But we went to see Anne Frank's exhibit here in New York. It was very interesting and beautiful. But you know, she has more countries translating it. But the thing is, her book is much smaller than my sister. But
it doesn't have all the poetry.
You know, has no poetry. She was much younger than my sister when she dies. My sister was 18 in 2 days. Yeah.
So we did receive one question, which is, how has your relationship to Judaism evolved over the course of your life? And this may be actually a question for both of you, because I,
Well, my family was never very religious. My grandma used to shine the candles on Fridays. My mom didn't do that, and we didn't go much to synagogue, but we were always Jews, and everybody knew about it. But uh, my grandparents, they were more religious, but not fanatics. Although the house they lived to, it's only 2 blocks, one half a block from the synagogue. And that's where you used to go on the holidays, where the ladies sat upstairs and the men downstairs. And now they're going to try to make a little.
A square in front of the synagogue and name it after Renia. So we're in talks
We
to
talk.
hope that happens.
The guy called from the town of Przemysl, he's the mayor, and he asked us if he would like to do it, but they don't have enough money. They only have 2 million zloty. They need more.
I have something of a Madeleine Albright story because my mother actually baptized my brother and I. Because when she came to this country, she and her mother said that the Catholic religion saved their lives.
Yeah.
And then when they were given this affidavit of support to come to the United States, they had a distant family member that met them at the boat. And her mother asked him if they should revert back to their birth names. And he said, you know what? They don't like the Jews here either. So just stay as you are. And I think that my mother and her mother felt that maybe we would be safer living even here as Catholics. And my father was secular too. So I would say,
but there were Jews that were married in synagogue.
Right. I mean, my worldview is sort of rooted in science and curiosity, and I don't think there's just one way to be Jewish, but it's certainly my identity, my culture, and my people.
Yeah. So,
Jews are smart.
um, so there was a question that someone said they would love to hear more about Renia herself and perhaps give a story or some details to give everybody a feel for what the diary is like.
Well, you should talk about
What
Renia was like and maybe a story of the both of you.
Well, Renia, sometimes I annoyed her. I was young. I was a young kid, but she always included me in certain things. I knew all her friends, and I knew Zygmunt, and I knew Maciek. And wait, I tell you the story of Maciek. In the book is Maciek, which is here. It was what was
Marcel.
Marcel. So he and Zygmunt went to Heidelberg together to school. They were also in Auschwitz together. They were best of friends. And he also had a crush on my sister because I found a little card. It says, today I can give you a kiss. And gave her red roses for her birthday. So I was working at Columbia Presbyterian for 6 years. I got my master's for free for Dr. Moss. And then I wanted to do electron microscopy. I got my master's, but then I went to NYU. He got me a job, medical school. And I went to cafeteria and somebody was screaming, Arianka, Arianka. It was Maciek. He was a doctor at NYU. And that I recognized me, and it was so great. She became our doctor, of course, and all that. But it was such a miracle again.